everyone. Welcome back to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ariana Silva. We are recording this episode on Valentine's Day, so you're going to notice a lot of pink and red in the room. And it also happens to be Ash Wednesday. So if you see a black cross smudge on my forehead, that's what it is from. So I hope all of you had a very happy Valentine's Day and also a solemn start to your Lent. Today on the Sweet Tea series, we are bringing on someone to talk about the Mexican political corruption, and then jumping back onto this side of the border to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl and a little bit about the potential Taylor Swift psyop. Here to do that is the Chief of Intelligence and Research, a co-host of The Hard Country, and a cousin of mine, it turns out, Joshua Treviño. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ariana.
So you just found this out for us. How are you related?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, first of all, before we get into our cousinhood, ever since I found out that you guys were running a show geared toward young conservative women, I've been agitating to be a guest on this show because there's no person with greater understanding and empathy for that cohort than myself. So thank you for having me on.
Right. As a father of two boys, you really know a lot about girls.
As a father of two boys, I really just nailed it down. Yeah, exactly. We are cousins. One of the things that's interesting about those of us with heritage in South Texas, Mexican-American heritage, is that the founding population of that area is pretty small. Actually, it goes back to the 1750s for the most part, and it is almost inevitable that anybody from South Texas or with roots in South Texas is going to be related to one another somehow. So you grew up in Mission, which is a place with a great mural of Tom Landry that you had never heard of till I mentioned it to you, despite spending your whole life there. I
still don't quite get who he is. I'm sorry.
I'm really, really sorry to hear that, but good for you. That doesn't really affect the core audience of the show. So and my dad's from Laredo, which is also part of the old Nuevo Santander colonization wave. And so as a wedding present, congratulations in advance. By the way,
thank you.
I will share with the viewers. I did some genealogy for you, and found out that we are, I think, 8th cousins once removed, and also 14th cousins once removed, depending on the line that you're looking at. But we were both descendants of the Garza genearch and the Treviño genearch that goes back to Nuevo León and Nuevo Santander.
Right. I remember that the first thing that you told me was, we're 14th cousins once removed. Isn't that so exciting? It's through the Treviño line. And I was really confused. I was like, it must be more recent than that. And you said, oh yeah, there's something else, but that's not important. This is a Treviño line. So
I do prefer the Treviño line. It's absolutely true.
Then the Garzas?
Well, I mean, neither of us are named Garza, but you're right.
I know. It's my mom. Well, my mom's maiden name, so for me, it still has some closer affinity, I guess.
It's got resonance.
Right.
Yeah. But it's true. No, we're related. And any of you out there who are from South Texas, you're probably related to all of your neighbors as well in some way.
Well, I guess speaking of South Texas, we're going to go a little bit more south of the border. You just came back from a trip to Mexico City.
Yes.
And you were there. It was a work trip with some meetings. What was the point of going on that trip in the first place?
Well, we've got a variety of partners in Mexico, and we also go down there to talk with office holders, journalists, researchers, intellectuals, journalists, and so on, to really get a sense of what's happening in Mexico right now. Mexico is a great country with great people. I don't just say this because you and I both have roots there, but it really is an objectively interesting place. Mexico, unfortunately, though, is also a country that's coming apart at the seams. It has a tremendous security crisis. There's a lot of Mexicans who would disagree with this, but unfortunately, I've been forced to conclude that it's nearing failed state status in some ways, especially up north and in places like Sinaloa. And so we as Texans have an obligation to understand what's happening in Mexico and also to develop policy responses to it. And that's why we had a Texas Public Policy Foundation delegation down there to have these conversations, to learn a little bit about what's going on in Mexico. One important thing that's going to happen this year is there's going to be a presidential election, not just here in the United States, but also in Mexico at the beginning of June. And
do those usually coincide in the same years?
No, they don't. So each Mexican president has a 6-year term. And so it coincides, I think, every other term, basically. For them, there's no re-election in Mexico, so you get one shot at being president for 6 years in Mexico. There's an election this year. The probable next president is going to be Claudia Sheinbaum, who until fairly recently was effectively the mayor of Mexico City. And so one of the things that we wanted to find out was what the direction of her governance is going to look like. And anyway, we brought some conclusions back, but that's why we were there.
Nice. And I think
Yeah.
this is going to be the first time we're doing it on the show. We're going to take a little picture tour through Mexico City. So last year, I got the chance to go with Josh to Mexico City. So you'll be seeing a couple of pictures first of that trip. So it was during this, I think it was the week leading up to Mexican Independence Day, if I'm not mistaken. But so I was there filming. So that's in that first photo. I was just amazed actually by how beautiful the architecture of this old like traditional city is and how that's still preserved today and used today. And then the last thing that was really significant for me whenever I was there was getting to go see something called the Tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe when she appeared to Juan Diego and really converted and changed Mexican history forever. So actually that last picture is with my a statue of John Paul II, who is my confirmation saint, so very important to me. So I didn't even know that was there, and that was fantastic.
Can I add something there real quick? By
Sure.
the way, just for context for the viewers, and I love this the kind of this triptych of pictures that you've chosen. That parish in the middle, that parish church in the middle, that church, the congregation there is almost 500 years old. Like that's the antiquity. I mean, what you're looking at in the center there, that's just a Franciscan parish. On the left, that's the Metropolitan Cathedral, which stands on the rubble of what used to be the Aztec main temple where they conducted the human sacrifices that Cortez and the Spanish thankfully put a stop to. So I think it's worth just emphasizing this is an old place that goes beyond anything we've got in the United States.
And I mean, even beyond what, especially when you look at Texas history, like we think anything 100 years is old here, but
Yeah.
there it dates back. And then here's an even closer picture of the Tilma, which was just so amazing to see that. I think the Mexican flag flying underneath her, just claiming her as a symbol of the country was something very moving. But then this trip, Josh got to do something else that I did not unfortunately get to see, which was bullfighting, or what's the word for it in Spanish again?
Torero, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was sending me pictures and videos as this was going on, just trying to make me jealous for rejecting going on this trip, which I will never, ever do again. But then there were other cultural features. So what are some of the things that I'm looking at with these photos?
Well, one of the things that I really like about Mexico City is, in some ways, it's sort of like what I would imagine being in Paris in the 1920s was like, almost a movable feast type of thing. The city is filled with parks, with open spaces. There's a lot of life. There's a lot of intellectual life that's very obvious there. It's all in Spanish, but if you can read Spanish, it's an amazing place to go get antiquarian books, really good, literature and things like that. And so, what you're seeing here, you're seeing a plaza out in Parque Mexico where a bunch of kids are out there and they're essentially playing soccer on this really kind of a blacktop. There's some books that I bought. On the right-hand side there, you're seeing the coyotes of Coyoacan, which was Cortez's headquarters essentially after the conquest of Mexico in 1521. And it is just so vivid and so vibrant nearly everywhere that the contrast with the decrepit state of Mexican governance is stark because it is such a great city.
Right. And I think that's one thing that we both want to emphasize is that Mexico City and like the Mexican people have a tradition that even like you and I both continue to claim a part of and have cultural features that we both really, really enjoy. So whenever we criticize the Mexican governance, it's almost recognizing that we have sympathy for people who are having to live under that.
Absolutely.
And so here, this is almost an overwhelming amount of pictures that I put together from different churches, I think in different parts of Mexico City. The thing that stood out to me with this, though, is the amount of gold that is used in these churches, just everywhere, and the color of the paintings. What do you think that symbolizes for Mexican society?
Well, what this really emphasizes, and what you're seeing here is a variety of photos. Some of this is from Metropolitan Cathedral when you were there, Ariana. Some of this is from the Cathedral of, the Parroquia de San Felipe Neri, which is also in the Historic Center. And what you're seeing here is legit Baroque Rococo art. Of a type that doesn't exist in the United States, and it signifies several things. I mean, the primary thing that it signifies is great faith. Obviously, just the profundity and the intensity of this very Spanish Catholic faith that took root in Mexico and is still there today. But the other thing that it shows is the extent to which Mexico at one point, when it was part of kind of the Spanish global metropolis, really was an extension of this very European, very Christian culture that wrapped around the world at one point. And the results of it are with us still today.
Right. And let's look at that photo in the middle there on its own. What does it say underneath there at the bottom?
Yes, this is the Reliquia de la Santa Cruz. This is a relic of the Holy Cross. And so what you've got, it's sort of a
Yeah, this
modified...
is getting a little bit closer to see where the piece of that cross is.
Yeah, it's sort of a modified monstrance that typically would probably hold a Eucharist. But what you're seeing in the center of a cross is literally a splinter in there. And I don't quite know what it's embedded in, because I didn't take a close look when I took the picture, but that's there, and it's there for reverence. And what's really interesting to me is that any of you who've been to Europe or things like that, you often see these churches like this as effectively museum pieces, people walking around and taking pictures. Obviously, I did walk around and take pictures, otherwise we wouldn't have these photos. But at the same time, they're active parishes with real parish life. And one thing I don't think it's in your photo set here, but I did text you a photo of it, Ariana. There was a monstrance down in Coyoacan at a 1527 parish, if I remember correctly, and the Adoration Chapel was full. So this is a
Wow.
real and living faith, and that was on a Tuesday afternoon, by the way.
That's so impressive. And people
Yeah.
can't get perpetual adoration here in a lot of America, which is so sad.
Yeah. Well, it is alive there for whatever reason, and I think that's worth understanding for us. As Americans, we can take a lot of pride, just pride, in a lot of our civic culture and our governance and the things that make it work. But there is virtue in faith and devotion as well, and I would argue that on some fronts, Mexico has gotten it right more than we have.
Right. And then again, just more religious, beautiful pictures here. And I think also, again, just showing the devotion to Our Lady that you see in Mexico.
Absolutely. Can you go back one actually though? I think it's worth that church on the left. That's St. Rose of Lima Parish. That's a 1943 church.
So even modern churches are being built with, I guess, architecture that we're not putting the time into in American churches.
Yeah, you don't get kind of the downfall of Catholic church architecture in Mexico really until you start hitting the 1970s.
Wow.
Which I think is true for a lot of the rest of the world. But it's just worth noting that for all the antiquity that we see, and there's a ton of antiquity just in these three photos, that one on the left is within living memory. And so for those of us who are traditionalists and we like this style of architecture, we like this style of devotion, we can get it back if we choose. It's not that far away.
And then I guess moving on from the significance of religion and Catholicism in Mexico, this is another photo that you sent me. So what's going on here?
More of a civic religion. This is Benito Juarez. So Benito Juarez, he's being crowned with the laurels of victory, and also the thanks of the Republic here. So Juarez, just to thumbnail it, was, I believe, a Zapotec Indian, which was unusual in Mexican civic culture for an indigene to rise to national leadership. But he was a liberal, he was a reformista, and he, in addition to defeating a lot of kind of the Mexican conservatives of his era, actually led the successful resistance of the Mexican nation against the French occupation in the 1860s. And one of the keys to his eventual victory, in addition to his persistence, his faith in the nation, was millions of arms and ammunition sent to him by Abraham Lincoln. So we have this historical example, which I think is very heartening, of the United States contributing to liberty in Mexico, contributing to the survival of the Mexican Republic against a foreign occupation. And although you'll find no mention of Lincoln here, not that there necessarily needs to be one, we should understand that this victory that you see commemorated here is in part the fruits of American policy and effort.
Right, and I think that highlights that at one point in history, America and Mexico had a friendship between their governances. Do you think that that's the case?
Occasionally, yeah. Look, there's always been friction with the U.S.-Mexico relationship for a variety of reasons, and the United States had its own purposes also in wanting the French out. We should be very clear about that. But when the relationship has worked, I would say it's worked well. It worked well when Mexico needed help to regain its independence from the French and from the Habsburg Emperor in Chapultepec Castle. And it also worked, I would argue, largely starting from the 1930s through about the first decade of this century, in which U.S.-Mexico relations actually were relatively placid and relatively fruitful. But that's been interspersed with a lot of episodes of violence and conflict, and unfortunately that seems to be where we're headed again today.
is into that violence and conflict.
I believe so.
So the last time you were in Mexico City was, I think, a year and a half before this trip, right? And
1
that
year.
summer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
about a
Back
year
in March.
apart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the difference between meetings that the last time you were in Mexico City and this time?
Well, without betraying confidences, Mexico and the Mexican political elite, and again, we really do have to separate. It's always worth saying over and over that you have to separate the kind of the mass of Mexicans and the elites who rule over them in many ways. A good friend once said to me that Mexico is what you get when you get a fundamentally good country ruled by elites who don't care about the people at all. And now that describes a lot of Washington, D.C. too. But that's a tragic description, I think, in many ways. But the absence of stewardship that you see among a lot of Mexican elites, left populists in particular, but not just them, is really heartbreaking, especially when you contrast that with the entrepreneurialism, the hard work, the effort, the desires and the dreams of ordinary Mexicans everywhere. So in our conversations, one of the things we've been trying to do is raise the alarm about the trajectory of U.S.-Mexico relations, because they've gotten quite bad over the past 6 years, especially under the current president, whose term is ending, I believe, on October 1st, 2024, Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
Also known as AMLO.
AMLO, yes, after his four initials. AMLO, if you don't know who AMLO is, I would encourage viewers of Sweet Tea to Google him and look up ProPublica, the left-wing media outlet ProPublica as well, because ProPublica published a story about 2 weeks ago about the probable links between AMLO and the Mexican drug cartels.
I actually have a quote from that.
Oh, please. Well, I don't mean to lap you. Go ahead.
No, perfect.
Read us the quote, yeah.
So the article was entitled, "Did Drug Traffickers Funnel Millions of Dollars to Mexican President López Obrador's First Campaign?" So usually when there's a question in articles, you pointed this out in your podcast, which is why I'm bringing it up.
Okay.
Usually when there's a question in articles, the answer will be no. It's actually not, or there's more to the story. In this case, is that the case? Did they funnel money?
Betteridge's law of headlines says that anytime a headline ends in a question mark, the answer is no. But I think
we're breaking rules in this.
Breaking rules in this one. I think ProPublica, which again, I'm astonished I'm praising ProPublica. It's a very left-wing outlet. But in this case, it had really extraordinary reporting on possible links between President López Obrador and the Mexican drug cartels. And
right. It says that the money was provided to campaign aides in 2006 in return for a promise that López Obrador administration would facilitate the traffickers' criminal operations.
Yeah.
So why should Americans care about that then, if it's happening on the other side of the border?
We should care if it's a narco state on our border, first and foremost, because that doesn't stay on the south side of the border. This is something that the Texas Public Policy Foundation has been pointing out over and over several years. And by the way, we had this thesis of a linkage between the current Mexican regime and the narco traffickers long before this ProPublica story broke. It's kind of been an open secret. I mean, we've talked to people. This is one reason we go to Mexico, because we actually are able to have conversations with individuals in person who are willing to tell us very candidly, yeah, there's an alliance between the president of Mexico and the Sinaloa cartel. So as to why we care, I mean, we care for a variety of reasons. First of all, because the goods that these cartels traffic in, apparently abetted by the Mexican state itself, kill tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans every year. So, that's reason number one to care. But
and that's referring to like fentanyl deaths.
Fentanyl, absolutely. Fentanyl, and then any other product, narcotic you can name that actually does carry a death toll with it, whether in direct effects or the generative violence that it creates when it enters American communities. We also have to understand that these cartels conduct a modern-day slave trade and human trafficking. We've all heard about the millions of illegal immigrants who are coming across the border right now, these illegal aliens who are flooding the country. It is a legitimate invasion in the constitutional sense. But we have to understand that every single one of these individuals is trafficked by these cartels, and it is commerce in man. We have to understand that. And there's no moral difference between it and the slave trade pre-1808 that landed on American shores. And so that's another reason that we have to care about it, because again, there's no problem down south that doesn't come into our communities. And then the third big reason to me that we have to care about it is that as Mexico continues to break up, as rule of law, as authority, as normal patterns of life continue to disintegrate in Mexico, that violence and corruption absolutely will come across the border, and in fact already has. We're lucky so far that the direct violence itself has not really come across the border. Although in the past, you can look to examples, 1910, 1920 in particular, in which American towns were, routinely attacked by Mexican bandits. That's not out of the realm of possibility given the trajectory of events. But what we can, we can look to right now that is happening right now is corruption. So corruption of local officials. There are multiple cases, just to give you one small subset of corruption, of sheriff's departments in South Texas. Looking back to the past 20 years.
And when you say South Texas, what parts of South Texas is that referring
Well,
to?
so the specific counties I'm talking about, and this is all in public record, you've got either sheriffs or sheriff's deputies, and again, I'm talking the year 2000 to 2024, so it's a generational span. But Presidio County out west, Hidalgo County, Cameron County, which is Brownsville, McAllen, and then I believe Starr County just had a sheriff's deputy who was also federally indicted.
That's so weird to think about, that I was growing up in a place that was like collaborating, at least to some extent, with.
Well, Hidalgo County actually had, I'm ashamed to say, a sheriff named Treviño, who was
one of our cousins.
One of our cousins, yeah, one of our cousins, who and his son was effectively head of this basically the special tactics unit, and he and his son, the two Treviños, liaised with the Los Zetas cartel to protect loads coming across the Rio Grande. And so they were essentially subcontractors. Interestingly enough, the head of the Zetas at the time, also a Treviño. So
Is that how they hooked up?
You should have no trust in us. Probably not. But this kind of thing, corruption is, the death in American communities is terrible. The violence is terrible. The insecurity is terrible. But corruption really is the end of democracy. Public corruption really is the end of our ability to rule ourselves and to live in freedom and liberty. And that to me is worth fighting. And that alone, set aside the fact that we have great sympathy for and compassion for our Mexican neighbors, because we do as Texans, that's reason enough to engage.
Right. So what does engaging with this issue look like?
It means a variety of things. And so at the foundation, we've been talking about a series of policy principles and policy answers that need to be done. If I had to pick one principle of action, and there's a variety of policies that could follow from it, I would link trade and security. That would be the number one thing that I would do. And this is, speaking for myself, but I think I speak reasonably for the foundation in this one as well. If you link trade and security, then that has a powerful incentivizing effect. Because again, if you think about what's happening south of the border, and you think about the cartels and the Mexican state writ large as effectively being in synthesis with one another, which they pretty much are. It's unfortunate to say, but they pretty much are. What do they care about? What's the incentive structure that gets them to deliver change? It's not a sense of stewardship to their people. They don't care about the welfare of the migrants. They don't care about the well-being of their fellow Mexicans. In fact, I would say that Texans care more about that than they do. But they do care about the money. They care about the money, and they care about the commerce that comes across. So if you have a policy where you're actually linking commerce, legal commerce, by the way, the billions that are made in cross-border trade, to the provision of security, and you don't get the benefits of that commerce unless you provide the security. My suspicion is that one thing is probably the single most efficacious move that policymakers could make to start generating real security at the U.S.-Mexico border. It's not the end of our concerns, but it would be a good beginning.
I would have I feel like an instinct that I would have that would agree with that is, it seems like in tourist areas in Mexico, they're going to find a lot more safety and security because there's an interest in keeping that area safe. So I think it does make sense, and it does track that, since that's something that they do care about, and it is something that you just are able to see through travel.
I think you're right.
Carry over.
Yeah. No. I think you're absolutely right, and you see it with like a special regime of police forces in tourist areas, right? And special hotlines for tourists and things like that. One of the things that that we, at the foundation, but that we as a conservative movement have talked about in the past several years is this idea of policy being America first. Like, you've got to put American first. Americans should be the proper focus of American policy, which is all completely true. It's obviously correct. Mexico needs Mexico first policy. Mexico needs, and this is beyond our power to impose, and I'm not suggesting that we do, but if I could wish anything for Mexicans, for the people that we talk with and liaise with and work with, and just the ordinary Mexican down south, is I'd love for them to have a government that puts Mexico first. That puts Mexicans first, because that would mean not just taking care of the tourists, not just taking care of the nice places in Mexico City where like you and I get to go, but taking care of the places where Mexicans actually live and work and must exist in order to pursue their livelihoods, that would be transformative change for them.
Right. And so to be able to learn more about these sorts of issues, I would definitely recommend, if you're wanting more on that, to go over to the Hard Country podcast. How often do you guys release? Is it every week, every other week right now?
It's sometimes it's every week, but it's at least every other week.
Right.
My colleague Melissa Ford
and she's been on the show.
Oh, she has?
Yes.
She's been on Sweet Tea?
She has.
Really? What did she talk about when she was here? She talked about Bolivia?
This, and then we did talk about her history in Bolivia, Texas, and
I didn't know that.
A couple of border stuff, but things have obviously changed since a few months. Everything, I feel like, goes really fast with what's happening at the border.
It does. Well, my absolutely delightful colleague, Melissa Ford, who is Bolivian American, and I recently found out has deep roots in East Texas as well. So maybe she and I are cousins too. But we do the Hard Country podcast, and that is probably the number one source I would recommend for keeping up with the Foundation's thought, analysis, and observation on what's going on south of the border.
Right. Well, I guess going farther north of the border, back into America, let's talk about another big thing that just happened last weekend for us. The Super Bowl just happened. Did you get a chance to watch?
I did get a chance to watch it, and it ended as I hoped, with a victory for the Chiefs.
Now you have to tell me, though, were you rooting it for the Chiefs because you were rooting for the Chiefs, or were you rooting for Taylor Swift's boyfriend's team?
Neither. No, neither. Please, honestly. No, I rooted for the Chiefs for two reasons. One is, as a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan, I hate the Niners. And so the Niners, seeing them defeated, it's not enough that my team wins. The other team must lose. And since my team has failed to win for about 30 years now.
So if you're a Cowboys fan at this time, you don't care about winning. You just need to make sure that the
I just
other
need to
guys
make
lose.
sure, look, I need to make sure the Redskins, they're the Redskins. I'll never call them the Commanders. The Redskins and the San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles, as long as those three teams lose at some point, it's a good season for me. I was alarmed to see the Niners reach the Super Bowl this year because they're actually a genuinely very good team under Shanahan. But they couldn't get it through. The other reason I was rooting for the Chiefs, though, is, of course, the origin of the Kansas City Chiefs. Do you know what the origin of the Kansas City Chiefs is? They actually started as the Dallas Texans with the American Football League. Yes, under the Hunt family, who still continues to own it today. Lamar Hunt founded the Dallas Texans, and eventually with the competition between what was in the NFL team, and the Dallas Cowboys, and the AFL team with the Dallas Texans eventually removed themselves to Kansas City. So they are part of the Texas diaspora of professional sports teams. Another member of that club is, of course, the Tennessee Titans, who were really the Houston Oilers. May they be remembered in honor.
I feel like this is more sports history than we have ever had on this show before.
Oh, listen.
Potentially ever will have on the show.
There is, again, I know probably the target market for the show is not really interested in NFL history in the 1960s, but if you have a man in your life that really is into football history, there's a great book called 10-Gallon War. I've forgotten the author, which is a history of the rivalry between the Dallas Texans, who become the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Dallas Cowboys, and it's well worth reading. You can still get it on Amazon. Highly recommend you order it.
They need a belated Valentine's Day gift to give someone.
10-Gallon War. Great book. Yeah.
So that gives, I guess, your thoughts on the actual bowl itself. What did you think about the Usher halftime show?
Boring.
Really?
Boring, forgettable. I mean, the halftime shows are typically nothing. I mean, it was. It felt like a nostalgia gift to people who were born in the Clinton administration, and I think that's probably what it was intended to be.
The funny thing is, I'm on the exact edge of that line, so yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, did you enjoy it?
So it was funny. The whole group that I was with really enjoyed it, and then I'm talking to other people. They either loved it like we did, or they hated it and didn't find it entertaining at all. Watching, I thought it was impressive. He was singing and roller skating at the same time. What more do you need to ask for from a Super Bowl?
Did you see the woman who fell off the stage on the roller skates?
No.
So apparently, this is the only interesting thing about the halftime show to me. There was a woman who was roller skating, because I guess there were a lot of people roller skating in there, and I was also like putting a kid to bed at that point too. So it was my attention was divided. Apparently, there's a woman who fell off stage in roller skating, and she has this phenomenal, actually really amazing, hilarious TikTok video. See, I'm relating to the youth. I'm talking about TikTok video. And she's got this giant black eye because she fell off the stage, and she explains how it came to pass. She lied on her resume because she's an actress, and
she said she could roller skate dance.
She said she could roller skate dance because she needed the work, and she said, how hard can it be? And she fell off the stage in the middle of the Super Bowl. And the
fact that she made it through rehearsals and that far, you got to give her props for that.
That is the spirit that made America. That woman right there, doesn't know how to roller skate, but she's up there in the Super Bowl and takes a tumble and owns it. Might be the most memorable thing that happened. at that halftime show.
Was her falling off of the stage.
Probably. Yeah.
I think the most memorable halftime show still has to be, for me at least, is the Lady Gaga performance, because she actually fell out of the sky. And so I think it's a success if someone fall. Did you watch
Was that
that one?
at this Super Bowl?
No. I'm saying in the past, like the most memorable Super Bowl halftime show was Lady Gaga's.
Oh,
that
no,
was
no.
I forgot what year that was, but she like came out of the sky and
Did she really?
Yeah, it was amazing.
I have only the most vague sense of who Lady Gaga is. I'm sorry. Is she?
Again, I guess people who were born at the.
Is she a communist? Like why is she? Why does she call herself that?
I feel like we need a separate episode to explore the
Really?
history
Okay.
of Lady Gaga.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
And there's like a lot of attachments to like even I guess LGBTQ culture now, and like some of the drag queen stuff that came out of that because of her eccentric dress. But also, yeah, it's an interesting case study. She's a phenomenal singer though. So
she was in A Star Is Born.
Yeah, she was.
Okay. Yes, I remember
She's
some of
done
the
some
singles
acting
from
and
that.
stuff
I
as
mean,
well.
she's legitimately talented.
But a lot of people will remember her like from the fact that she wore a meat dress once, like made entirely of meat to something.
Yes, right, yeah.
But she is not the female superstar who I was going to bring up today.
Oh,
a lot of people are calling this the Taylor Swift Bowl. And the first, whenever I had started this podcast series, Josh came to my office and he said, "You have to have me on the show so I can talk about Taylor Swift." So today you're finally getting your wish granted.
Oh my gosh.
Let's talk about that whole relationship.
Dreams do come true. Mm-hmm. Well, I think to fully, I'll put on my Vladimir Putin hat. I think to fully understand what's happening with Taylor Swift, we really have to go back to the Homeric era of the Iliad. So rewind with me about 6,000 years, if you will, to the Bronze Age. And
I feel like this is Tucker Carlson's show whenever Putin came on to
consider the consider the arc, the romantic arc of loss and reclamation at the heart of the Iliad, which is the woman Helen, who is faithless and spirited away to Troy by Paris. And Paris himself, of course, is not much of a man. He tries to be a warrior, but he's a slight figure and certainly can't stand up to the Achaeans, Ajax and Achilles and the heroes of old. Certainly not to Menelaus, Helen's actual husband, who motivates the Achaeans to war. A war of 20 years that ends in Troy being ruined and Helen being borne back by Menelaus. So Taylor Swift is reenacting this without knowing it, this archetype of reclamation. And Travis Kelce is the American Menelaus. She's been spirited away by these slight waifs of British men who will blow away in a stiff breeze, who are not manly, who could never possibly defend her against, a phalanx attack on the plains of Anatolia. But Travis Kelce can. And so she has now returned in fullness, the Helen being born back by the American Menelaus. And I think it is a culturally significant and celebratory moment for all of us.
Did you come up with this comparison yourself?
Who wouldn't? I mean, didn't you?
You know, I did not look at Taylor Swift's relationship and think, "Wow, this reminds me of a Greek classic." Whenever I was examining it.
Well, then it pleases me to be the first.
What I did notice was a lot of the drama that surrounded it in terms of the potential psyop. Have you heard about the rumor speculations? I don't want to be like that person who's like, I believe in this conspiracy theory. But I do want to be the person that promotes the idea and the fun of conspiracy theory.
Of course. Well, just as Diana the Huntress and Aphrodite, the goddess of love, were jealous of Helen, so too have some of the lesser lights of conspiracy land decided that Taylor Swift herself is an agent of the other side of the Biden regime. And now, in fairness to them, Swift's views on politics and society are moronic. I mean, there's no hiding that. Anybody who has watched, as I have, the Miss Americana documentary on Netflix, which is 90 minutes of your life.
This is why I needed you here. I'm not the Taylor Swift expert. I had to bring someone who actually watched through that.
I think you can. It's interesting to me because there's certain things that you have to know about to understand America now, to understand culture. And the NFL actually is one of them, whether you like it or not. And I would argue that Taylor Swift is another. And unfortunately, this pains me so much because I loathe it. But the Harry Potter series is another. Anything that provides a
Yep, that one
narrative,
I can connect to.
a narrative life pathway for people you must know about, even if you don't partake of it. And so Swift especially has provided this template for a whole generation of women who are themselves, one of the primary fonts of popular culture, and therefore civics, and therefore everything that happens to the rest
And
of
it
us.
is interesting watching something that comes out of culture make its way all the way into politics, so deeply so that even Hillary Clinton tweeted something that has gotten traction, which is congratulations to Taylor's boyfriend and the entire Kansas City Chiefs community.
Well,
Did you see that she tweeted
yeah,
that?
no, I think Hillary is mapping her own marital relationship onto that one. There's the old joke that as Hillary and Bill are traveling through Arkansas on their campaign bus, Hillary says, "Stop, stop, stop the bus. I know this guy at the gas station." And so she gets off, she talks to the guy, she gets back on, and Bill Clinton says, "Well, who was that, Hillary?" And she says, "Oh, you're not going to believe this, but I used to date the owner of that gas station in high school." And Bill says, "Well, if you'd married him, you'd be married to a gas station owner." And she says, "Bill, if I'd married him, he'd be president of the United States."
Is this a story that she's told?
No, she hasn't. That's just an old Clinton joke.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, well, you know how Kamala Harris and, like, even Biden have come up with these old childhood stories. I was like, oh, did this come from, like, the Clinton
No, this is
campaign as well?
a false story.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, like congratulations to Taylor's boyfriend. Yay, girl power. But, I mean, that's kind of...
That's the energy you're getting from it. Those are the vibes of it.
It's so tiresome. This tweet is dedicated to the 14 people globally who saw the marbles in the theater.
Because they're the audience who would have appreciated that and clapped and thought it was so brave. Did you know on her Twitter profile,
Yes.
she describes herself as, what was it? Because in the past, I know she had pantsuit aficionado on her Twitter bio.
Oh, yeah.
And then now I think it was hair. It was something about her hair. Like had the... Wow, I feel like I can't remember it now. I'll throw it up on screen. You guys are seeing it now in the future.
I have not voluntarily read a Hillary tweet until,
I had to, and I
until
pulled
this
it down.
day.
But the bigger tweet that I think related more to the psyop thing that I wanted to get to was the Biden one, where they not confirmed it, but at least were in on the joke, but just showing how all of these cultural things and the culture war is really playing out all the way up to the president of the United States. And do you want to read the tweet
Of course,
here?
yeah.
What he
I mean,
said?
Joe Biden says, just like we drew it up, and he's got the dark Brandon eye laser thing going on. Now, we should be clear that this was posted at 9:50 p.m. Eastern time, so way after the president's bedtime. But I do want to congratulate whatever intern came up with it and put it up.
Not only came up with it, but got approval to post it. Whoever gone through that process, I thought that was pretty funny.
Is there really any authority at this point? Who can say? What is truth?
Who's the authority? I don't know.
Yeah.
But with that, to kind of go back a little bit and explain what this whole psyop is, whenever I was trying to find this video today, all I was seeing was articles saying 4 out of 5 Republicans believe in this new theory, or just statistics like that are coming out. And it's because Jesse Waters spoke about it on Fox News. So I'm going to show you a little clip of that real quick. So
all right,
let's watch it.
Well, around 4 years ago, the Pentagon's Psychological Operations Unit floated turning Taylor Swift into an asset during a NATO meeting. What kind of asset? A psyop for combating online misinformation. Listen.
You came in here wanting to understand how you just go out there and counter an information operation. Well, the idea is that social influence can help encourage or promote behavior change, so potentially as like a peaceful information operation. I include Taylor Swift in here because she's a fairly influential online person.
She finishes out with online personality.
Okay.
Had you ever seen that clip before?
No, but this is standard issue marketing garbage. I mean, this has been around for years and years and years and years. Oh, we're going to get an influencer to do this. So nothing that I'm seeing here at this thing is even remotely dispositive. It's good entertainment, though.
It is. And watching the Super Bowl with that added background of like, oh, Taylor Swift could have been like it almost felt like a political Hallmark movie where like, oh, she's just a girl working with NATO and he's just a guy who's working with Pfizer, and they have to come together, but they actually fall in love. And I thought that added a new backdrop to watching the Super Bowl this year.
For those of us of a particular age who grew up on a lot of John Hughes films, the girl who works with NATO is actually extremely motivating.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, young people.
Yeah, sorry, that just like right over my head.
Okay. Well, ask an elderly person to explain it to you.
Ah, gotcha.
All right, go ahead.
We'll have to get a translator next time we're here. So with that in mind, though, we're talking about like Taylor Swift now, that relationship. But what was it that made you fan of Taylor Swift to begin with?
Like I said, I'm interested. I mean, a few things. I'm interested in her effect on popular culture and the narrative that she provides for the lives of these individuals for good and for ill. I also think she's kind of a tragic figure. I mean, you can't watch again the Miss Americana documentary, which really does not portray her in a good light at all, and not feel sorry for her in some way. Sort of the price of fame is taken out. But also, I mean, in fairness, when she's good, she's very good. The 10-minute reissue of I think it was on Red of All Too Well is phenomenal. It's a work of art. She's actually not that good of a singer, but she's a good writer when she chooses to be. When she doesn't choose to be, she's an abominable writer. But when she really hits and when she has the right producers, Max Martin, for example, or Shellback, I think both of whom worked on the 1989 album, and that sounded, in terms of quality and lyrical content, like a legit album from the year of her birth, 89. And it's terrifically impressive. Now, you go to some of the other albums, Reputation, Lover, which are abominable. I mean, they're garbage. They should be, I want to assemble a crowd of angry Baptists to throw it into a pyre because they're so bad. But
we might be able to find some of those around here to help you out.
Possibly, yes. Yeah. We'll have to leave Austin to really get a critical mass. I think that's worth recognizing. And the fact is, she's present. And living in the 2020s, you would simply be ignorant of what's happening in the world around you as much as you would be had you chosen to not know of the Beatles in the 1960s.
So because she's that integral to what it means to be American at this point in time.
To be American, to be part of popular culture, Western popular culture.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And again, it's so interesting to me how whenever something gets that big, that it floods even into the politisphere to where you can't speak about an election coming up without talking about her.
Yeah.
So another big story that happened, I think it was last week, where Newsweek had published an article saying that strategists found that 18% of voters say they're more likely or significantly more likely to vote for a candidate endorsed by Swift. Had you heard about that statistic?
I hadn't heard that, but that number actually sounds low.
Right. So with the whole psyop idea that we were talking about before, one of the ideas was that the Biden administration was using her and they were going to have her announce, I'm going to vote for Biden, and it was going to be after the touchdown. And anyway, that was the whole psyop idea of why the Chiefs were going to have to win for Biden.
Yeah.
But the other thing that came out,
she's actually an RFK voter. Sorry, I don't know that. Yeah.
But here's the thing that everyone was pointing out after the whole scandal with this. She endorsed him last time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
it's not like it changes too many lines, for one thing. Another piece of it that everyone's ignoring from this article, that study also showed that 17% of voters are less likely to vote for Biden if she were to endorse him. So it's just a wash, but it is just funny how that she's become such a central figure that everyone's recognizing, she's someone to watch out for because it's a modern day influencer who's changed young women.
I think the reality, though, is that the people who are going to be moved from a voting perspective, the people who would be moved by Taylor Swift are already voting for Joe Biden, and the people who would be repelled by that kind of celebrity endorsement are already voting for Donald Trump. So
which is why it's just a wash.
Yeah, well, I mean, but even if the numbers were uneven, I'm just saying it wouldn't change the actual outcome. I think, but it's interesting to speculate about, and it certainly is entertaining to do so.
Right.
So let's continue.
And so much so, I'll just give my one last stat that I had about this.
Okay.
So, again, this is so crazy that people are studying this, but Monmouth University studied or released a survey, and it showed that just under 1 in 5 Americans believe that Taylor Swift is a part of a covert effort to help President Joe Biden win the 2024 election.
Oh,
so
wow.
People are believing it, or they're joking, because that's the other thing about online polling.
I think it might be a bit of an own goal in some way. Like whatever genius decided that it's a good idea for the American right to have a handsome football star meathead with his blonde songbird girlfriend encode that left wing, especially after they win the Super Bowl. That may be an outcome that these folks want to reconsider.
That's actually true. I hadn't
Don't
even
you
thought
think?
about that yet.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't
That's really
code that
replacing
left
things.
wing. There's the famous. There's the famous photograph. I think of. I think it's Danny White, one of the Cowboys greats from the 1970s, who is kissing a cheerleader after a victorious game. Have you seen this picture?
No, I haven't.
No, it's probably like 30 years before you were alive. So no, I guess you haven't. But anyway, it's a famous picture, and that's it's sort of its analog is to its visual analog and its thematic analog is to the sailor in Times Square who's kissing the nurse on BJ Day. Have you seen that picture?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
That
Okay,
I do.
so in both cases, it's a sailor, it's a football quarterback, and they grab this woman in their celebratory
Right.
kiss, and things like that. Like until 20 minutes ago, those were right coded images. Like people looked at it and said, "That's America. That's the America I want to have." And that and suddenly, and you're giving that to the left. Come on, guys.
So we're surrendering something, is what you're saying here.
Menelaus, American Menelaus belongs to us. I don't care how many vaccines he's gotten. Get him back. Yeah.
So even if Pfizer has him, we can get him back.
We can get him back. We can reclaim him. Yeah.
So I guess speaking about the influence of Taylor Swift on young women, I want to talk with you a little bit about the idea of women in leadership and what makes women good leaders.
Okay.
Which might be, I guess, a little bit funny that I had, a man on the show to talk about this with me.
It's based though.
It is based.
It's
I mean,
pretty
to ask
based
this
of
though.
you. I mean, that is a lot of
On a scale from 1
that's
to
a lot of
really
trad
based,
coding
I'm at the
coming
really
from
based.
you on that front. So I better talk to a man about women's leadership.
Just to make sure that I understand it.
Please, my trad Catholic friends, continue. My trad Catholic Hispanic South Texas friends.
I feel like we try to keep it even here. We'll have about 20 women on the show to talk about it, and then 2 men just to make sure we're
Okay,
spreading
all right.
it out.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with that, I guess, what do you think makes a good woman leader?
Oh man. There's more than one archetype, though. But I think women's leadership it's obviously qualitatively different than men's. And if I can start with the wrong way to do it, in my view, the wrong way to do it is to do it in a way that denies the ontological uniqueness of women, which is rooted in qualities that are not male and will never be, chief among them, but not only, maternity, the capacity for maternity, and that and everything that goes with it, gives women a leadership edge in many ways. There's a man that I'll never have, and it's vice versa too. There's other things that go with it. When you think of women leading. To me, this is not. I know this is not a religious show, but to me, the ultimate example of a woman leader actually is the Virgin Mary in Catholic and Orthodox tradition. Someone who actually does assume a leadership role in steadying the early church, a continuing role for those of us of a particular denomination and faith, in ensuring the orthodoxy, small o orthodoxy of the church, and so that's an example of women's leadership. I'll also give, if I could draw from a much more crass and base level of popular culture.
Yes, please do.
I want to illuminate. I know you haven't seen either of these movies, which in the pre-show discussions I was very disappointed to learn this.
I need to fix it by next week. I'll fix
You
this.
need to watch for women's leadership. And we'll get to a movie that you have seen because I know you want to ask about one particular person. You need to watch Terminator 2, and you need to watch Aliens as well. One of this is orthogonal to your show, but one of the minor theses that I've enjoyed banding about over the years is this idea that James Cameron, over a period of just under 5 years, made one of the best movies about motherhood and the best movies about fatherhood in modern American history. Terminator 2 is the movie about fatherhood, but in it you have Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton's character, who is a great example of a woman who leads, a woman who fights, but is at the same time very conscious of the need that her son needs a father. So that's item one. The other one in Aliens, you've got Sigourney Weaver's Ellen Ripley, who also leads and fights and actually takes over from weak men who are not able to fulfill what they ought to be doing as men. Poor Lieutenant Gorman being the chief example. And Bill Pullman too, Hudson. But she also is somebody who steps forth. And I think what's interesting between the two portrayals in both these Cameron films is that both women are they use violence, but they don't shed their femininity. and they do it in the protection of their children, symbolic or real. And that, to me, speaks to a particular quality of women's leadership that is inaccessible to anyone else. Now, that doesn't mean, like, in the real world, obviously, when you're not being attacked by cyborgs or aliens, that there's no role for women's leadership in that. It clearly isn't. But, I think I'll hold the rest of my thought for I know what your follow-up question is, because you want to ask about somebody specific. So please, go ahead.
Right. So I do agree that that's definitely a component of it, and like filling that in, and there is something that's a maternal instinct and to care for other people that will drive women in leadership roles. And something that we both agree on is that modern action movies and that have women in them, they usually don't cast, or they don't have a female character or like a real woman character. They have someone who's like a woman playing a character, but really it's a role that you could have just gender swapped it and it would have fit better as a man and made more sense.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and that's worth going into just really briefly, because what they're doing is they're writing women as if they were men in the belief that is the fulfillment of women. This is where the Marvel movies have gone completely wrong. I don't know. Did you watch any of the Marvel movies? Did you watch the Avengers? Or?
Yeah, so I watched most of them leading up until oh my gosh, Endgame, and then after that I kind of gave up.
Oh, smart
And I
move.
I feel like I will defend WandaVision, though, and that I think that she actually was a female woman character in a way that other modern superhero women are not. They're not women. They're just like, they have a female casting for something that is really a male role.
And what was her heroic fulfillment in the end?
Motherhood.
Exactly, right. So
but I do want to qualify this in that there's different types of motherhood that women take on throughout their lives.
Totally
caring
agree.
for other people.
Totally agree. No. I think we're on the same page. The reason I bring up the Marvel movies, though, I don't know if you recall in the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, Black Widow. Do you recall this? Black Widow expresses an incompleteness, like kind of the core, because she has been the Red Room where they train her as a Russian spy. They render her sterile. And what was interesting to me is when that came out, the howls of protests from the online left were absolutely deafening. And actually, I think that resulted in a change in how Disney and the MCU team approached writing women, which is where you get really just abominable content like She-Hulk, for example. Did you watch that?
No, thank goodness.
You watch all the Star Wars garbage, but you didn't watch She-Hulk? Like She-Hulk makes...
Star Wars didn't make that many movies. Marvel was done.
No, that's fine. Yeah, well, I'll just say this. She-Hulk makes the very worst Star Wars show like Ahsoka.
No.
Look like Faulkner.
Audience listening to this, please go watch our episode on Ahsoka so you're not confused by this blasphemy.
All right, I'll let you continue to run your show. Please go ahead. But Star Wars, right?
Yes. I was just going to say, whenever you were talking to me off the show just about some of the female action heroes of like the 1980s who really embodied strong female leadership and it demonstrated really good examples for women. I asked like, do you think that Leia fits into that category? So here's your question.
and I thought that was a really interesting question too, because it actually made me stop and think about it. How does Princess Leia in the Star Wars films, at least the first two, we'll set aside like Return of the Jedi was just Muppets basically, but you see Star Wars and Empire, and what I think is interesting in there is that there's a subtle type of leadership that she exerts within those films. It takes, I won't say it takes more than one watch, but if you're not looking for it, you might miss it. She is overtly coded up front as kind of a capital L leader. She's a princess, she's a politician, she's a military leader within the rebellion. But the real effect of her leadership actually is it turns out to be in the life of Han Solo. And that turns out to be the enduring effect that the films focus on, is that before her, he's a rogue, right? He's a nobody, first of all, but he's a pirate, he's a rogue, he's a smuggler, he's out it for money, he has no responsibility. And it is her and her effect on him, her leadership of him, which expresses itself in many different ways, that makes him turn for the first time to a higher cause, to something with meaning and purpose. And direction, and I think that is a really powerful illumination of one of the things that women's leadership can do in individual lives or collectively in many cases, and so that's I think it's a great example.
And I think that also displays a different, I guess, phase of life in where women can enact leadership, is calling men to hire, even if they're not like in married yet, or just in social groups. I've noticed that that's a big thing that takes place as well.
Absolutely.
But and even though, of course, it would be fantastic if men took that responsibility upon themselves, realize like, we have a broken culture, I can change that.
But
women,
let's be honest
right.
here. Yeah. Right.
Well, I'm saying it would be great, but then women in turn also do have a responsibility, especially if you realize that, to have standards and call the men around you, even in your friendships, to hire. And I
Yeah.
think that they'll usually, a lot of times I've noticed that they'll respond to that call if you're willing to set those standards to begin with.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's probably true. The aggregate of men will meet the standard that the aggregate of women set.
Right. And so as women, I hope that like what I can do with this show and just in female friendships in my life is to be able to like, build a community where that's what we expect from people and hopefully change the culture one to a little group of friends at a time.
Well, it's too late for me, but I hope people of your generation respond.
So concluding the show, I want you to be able to give a piece of advice to younger women. What is it that you think that they can
Oh my gosh.
they can do?
Just in life in general?
Yeah. You actually had a good example the other day, but I don't want to take your answer from you.
I don't remember. What was my good example?
Well, your answer,
You want to
something
prompt
that
me?
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
Well, it's something that I'm going to be doing very recently.
Oh, yes. Oh. Get married early, have kids early. Well, I mean, don't take my word for it. There's a lot of social science behind that. But yeah, that is good advice for everybody, for men and women, both is to do that. I'll add one thing to it though. Go to church, or go to synagogue, or practice your religion, unless it's an evil religion. Don't do that. But do that. That kind of meaning, I think can get. I'll speak from personal experience. Its purpose can be obscure when you're younger. I feel like a very old person saying this. I'm only 48, by the way, so give me a little bit of slack. But the purpose of that can be obscure. But what you find is that if you invest in habitus, to borrow a Catholic phrase, if you invest in the actions and understanding, as Aristotle said, that actions define us. It's what we do that defines us. And if you cultivate those actions, whether it's going to church on Sundays, if you're Catholic, going to Mass, going to Eucharistic adoration, having a prayer routine, no matter what Christian denomination you are, going to synagogue if you're Jewish, mosque if you're Muslim, and so on. Cultivating those habits and cultivating that way of life, you are going to find later on, maybe not much later on, depending, when you do have people who depend on you, whether they're children or spouse or the network of individuals with whom you associate, that is going to be the foundation upon which you subsist and will see you through the suffering that's inevitable in any life. And so in addition to all that, that's my counsel.
Thank you so much for that, Josh.
Thank
I
you
hope
for
people
having
are
me
able
on.
to take that to heart. Yeah, I'm glad that we actually got to be able to spend this much time talking. I feel like usually we're caught in between offices and getting 3-minute talks. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
It's always my pleasure, Prima. It's good.
And where can people find you?
When I'm least expected. Oh, no, sorry. You can find me at texaspolicy.com. And also on The Hard Country on YouTube. So look up The Hard Country on YouTube and you can find us there.
Yeah, thank you again for being on the show. And to everyone else, happy Friday. Have a good Lent, good fruitful Lent, and a happy Valentine's Day weekend.